My name is Mark, a recording angel. I've been observing this earth since the dawn of creation. The Most High has asked me to share my recordings with you. The following are my records of the church's early years and earliest believers, not just adults, but children too, collected in this book, Champions of the King, the Story of the Apostles. If today's recording contains situations which might be uncomfortable for younger listeners, I will mark the video with the words parental guidance recommended. Elihu ben Malchus, Mediterranean Sea. The guardians hovered near the boat, about to depart on the Mediterranean journey, as they had on the land journey, up to Seleucia in Syria. Saul and the young John Mark lay below deck, propped against the side of the boat, doing their best to keep their stomachs stable. Tempers were short, and became shorter as the two became more seasick. Barnabas remained below, trying to keep the two from arguing, and occasionally offering sips of water. Elihu stayed up on deck. He would far rather take the stinging salt spray in his face than Saul's hostility toward Mark. He thought Caiaphas had been the most caustic person he'd ever met in his life, but apparently he was wrong. His spirits lifted as the harbor of Salamis came into view. It was beautiful.
"Is that it?" he asked one of the sailors. "Is that Cyprus?"
"Sure is," the sailor replied cheerfully. "The best harbor on the island. It has deep water, which makes it easy for even the largest ships to come in here. Because of that, all the finest copper, flax, wine, fruit, and honey are traded here, and then exported to all the Mediterranean ports nearby."
"I wonder if there are any Jews here,"
Elihu mused to himself. "There are," the sailor told him.
I didn't realize I said that out loud,"
Elihu said, embarrassed. "Oh, don't worry about it. Jews are always searching each other out, and there's a pretty good colony here. You'll probably be able to find friends that you knew in other places. We've taken a lot of Jews to here from different ports, especially since some controversy a few years back. A person named Stephen got stoned, and people began fleeing Judea. It's kind of settled down a little now, but you never know when it might start up again." Elihu nodded. He wondered what the sailor would say if he knew that Saul, who had been the ringleader of the persecution of the way, was below deck. He decided this wasn't the time to mention that fact. Upon leaving the ship, Barnabas and Elihu found lodging for their two seasick companions, where they could clean up and rest until they recovered their land legs.
"Would you like to go look around Salamis while these two rest?"
Barnabas asked. "I have some friends here." Elihu broke into a wide grin. That sounded much better than waiting for their two companions to get over their seasickness and become friendly again. I followed the two on their explorations. After all, I was recording Elihu's choices. The guardians could take care of the other two. As they wandered through the market, Elihu drank in the new sights and sounds and smells.
"Cyprus is a beautiful place,"
he blurted out at one point. Barnabas nodded.
"Yes, but then I would think so, because it's my home. My calling is in Antioch right now, but every time I get an opportunity, I come back here."
"I can understand why,"
Elihu said.
"Over there is the citadel,"
Barnabas pointed. Elihu glanced in that direction.
"Who lives there?"
"The proconsul of the island. His name is Sergius Paulus."
"Oh, I wish we could see the inside of the palace,"
Elihu said wistfully. Barnabas raised an eyebrow.
"Well, I guess it depends on why one is inside the palace, as to whether it would be much fun."
What do you mean?"
"If you get invited there as a guest, it would be pretty marvelous, and you would probably enjoy it. But if the authorities dragged you in there because you were in trouble, it would not be much fun."
"Oh, I hadn't even thought about that. Do you think that Sergius Paulus will give us a hard time?"
"I don't know," Barnabas said. "He's always seemed to be a pretty reasonable man, but I don't think that they have had conflicts here with Christ's followers yet. We'll find out."
Elihu still wished he could see the inside of the palace, although the idea of appearing there as a prisoner sounded frightening. Paul and the young John Mark were soon feeling better and began traveling all over the island preaching about Jesus. One day, the four of them had been walking for hours. As they crested a little hill, a beachside village came into view. Barnabas took a deep, satisfied sigh and said,
"It's Dion, my home."
"Really?" Elihu asked. "Do you have family there?"
"Some, and friends. And if things have gone well, perhaps some friends from Jerusalem too."
They hurried down the hill and approached a house. Barnabas knocked and called out,
"It's Barnabas!"
The door flung open, and much shouting and hugging followed as Barnabas greeted everyone. Then turning to his three companions, he said,
"I have guests with me,"
and introduced them. A tall man, who had been busily hugging Barnabas and slapping him on the back, turned pale and his jaw clenched.
"How can you bring this man into our home and put all of our lives in danger?" he demanded.
"Please, Lazarus, he's my guest,"
Barnabas whispered. The man frowned and said nothing.
"Friends, this is my family," Barnabas said, gesturing toward the people clustered by the door. "This is my mother and my sister, Mary, and this is Lazarus of Bethany, who moved here with the other Marys for safety during the persecution in Jerusalem."
Saul silently looked at the ground, while Lazarus's jaw clenched harder.
"This Mary is Jesus' mother," Barnabas continued, "and this Mary is Lazarus' sister. Around here, if you just call Mary, one of them will come," he said with a smile.
Mark and Elihu laughed at his little joke, then stopped quickly, realizing that the three of them were the only ones to find it amusing. The others stood with stony expressions.
"This is Saul," Barnabas said, pointing to the little man. "He follows Christ now."
"So he says," Mary, the sister of Lazarus, hissed.
Saul raised his eyes to her.
"How can you hold my life before Christ against me?" "Enough!" Lazarus exploded. "You insult my sister in my own home?"
Stop! Barnabas said, waving his arms. "This is not how this was supposed to go. Jesus has changed all of our lives. None of us would have been friends a few years ago, but he hath brought all of us together. He hath forgiven and cleansed all of us. Saul has become a Christian and is a preacher of the good news about Christ. In his service he has traveled many places and suffered many things, and it is not fair to hold his past against him any more than it is fair to remember Mary's past. And Lazarus, my friend, you were once a dead body. How would you feel if our fellow Jews treated you as unclean because of that fact?"
Lazarus almost cracked a smile.
"I hadn't thought of that."
Small smiles teased at the corners of several mouths, and the group became less tense.
"Let's start this over," Barnabas said after a moment. "My family meet my friends, and my friends meet my family. We are one in Christ. Now how can we do this without fighting with each other?"
Lazarus bowed.
"Friends of Barnabas and friends of Christ are welcome in my home. Please come in."
Elihu enjoyed the days they spent in Dion. Lazarus and the various Marys were hungry for news of Jerusalem.
"How's my sister?" Mary, the sister of Lazarus, inquired one day. "Is she and her family well?"
"Yes," Barnabas said, "and they still live in your family home in Bethany. They have provided shelter and comfort for many Christians fleeing Jerusalem, and so far they have escaped the persecution."
"And do they have children? I know that when my sister married Daoud, he had that young red-headed son of his."
Barnabas laughed.
Well, now, they have several running around, and your sister is very happy. She does all the organizing of any of our get-togethers there.
Yes, she's the most organized person I know. I feel that when the gifts were given to us at birth, she got enough domestic gifts for the both of us, and so I didn't receive any. What about John? Asked Mary, Jesus' mother.
He is well,
Barnabas answered, smiling at her.
He sends his love, and as soon as he feels it is safe, he will come back for you and bring you back to the family home.
The catching up went on and on. Saul remained uncharacteristically quiet unless someone asked him a specific question. Mary, Jesus' mother, headed to where Elihu and Mark sat. You two look homesick, she said. Tell me about your families. Mark smiled. I don't think we've met before, but my mother owns the home where your son the Christ rented the room to celebrate Passover right before, well, you know. That's wonderful. I knew your mother well. She's a sweet woman. I'm sure she really misses you. His eyes glistened, and she tactfully turned to Elihu. What about your family, Elihu? Are you from Jerusalem too?
I am. My father and mother both work for Caiaphas, but my mother and I are followers of the Christ, though my mother has to do that secretly.
And your father, does he believe in my son? Elihu frowned.
He can't make up his mind, and it has made him unwell. He was in the garden that night when Peter rushed up and tried to behead him with the sword. My father ducked just in time and had only his ear slashed off. Yeshua, he picked up Father's ear from the ground and put it right back on his head, and it was as if it had never been wounded, except there was blood all over the place, so we could tell it had been. His ear has been fine since then, but his mind has not. I feel that if he decided one way or the other, he'd be better off, but feeling torn and refusing to make a decision is destroying him.
It's true, Mary said with a sigh. Indecision can be more destructive than a wrong choice sometimes. So how did you come to be with the group here?
It was dangerous for followers of the Christ at the house of Caiaphas. My mother is sending me with Saul and Barnabas, hoping that in their travels they will go to Lystra. I have an aunt there. She's married to a Greek, so the family's been estranged from her for many years. But now her home seems to be a safe place to send me. I wanted to stay and help care for my father and protect my mother, but she insisted that I go.
Mary nodded. You are a good and obedient son, and I believe God will bless you for honoring your mother and obeying her even when all your own instincts make you want to stay. God will care for her even more effectively than you could. She smiled. He honors the obedience of his followers. Both young men leaned against the wall and stared up at the star-dusted sky. Talking to Mary had made them miss their own families even more. It was late in the night when the visiting finished and the fire burned down to glowing coals. The two young men leaned against a tree a short distance from where Saul was loudly preaching about Jesus. They had heard his sermons so many times that their minds were wandering this afternoon. Elihu was drawing in the sand with a stick. What is it? Mark asked when he noticed what the other was doing.
Oh, it's a self-portrait.
As he stared at it, Mark started laughing. Doesn't look like anything I recognize. Here, let me try. A few moments later, Mark stood up. Elihu studied it.
What is that? Are you saying I'm a donkey?
Sure, you're the beast of burden. They make you carry everything. Elihu laughed.
Well, that's because you're the scribe, so you're supposed to be writing down everything that they say.
Mark's smile slowly faded from his face.
Well, what's the matter? Aren't you recording what they preach? I see you writing all the time.
Yes, I am writing all the time.
Well, you write. I carry things Saul preaches.
What about Barnabas?
Oh, he's the fireman,
Elihu said. Fireman? What do you mean? You're the one who always starts the fires in the evening. Elihu laughed.
Those are just cooking fires. Your cousin Barnabas stamps out all the fires that Saul starts, by the way some people react to him. Think about it. Everywhere Saul has gone, eventually he's gotten thrown out of the place. Now he's with your cousin Barnabas, and Barnabas soothes over everyone's feelings and keeps them from starting big arguments. He hasn't been beaten or thrown out of any place since we've been here. Although it almost happened in Gideon."
They grinned at each other. "You're right," Mark said. "Perhaps God put my uncle and Saul together because Saul needed to learn some diplomatic skills, and maybe my uncle will become a little more assertive. He's terribly shy."
"It could be," Elihu mused. "My mother has often said that everyone in our life is there for a reason, that even if they are really annoying, there's something we can learn from them, and that we should thank God for them and treat them as though He put them there on purpose instead of being upset at them, but never made any sense to me until now."
Mark stared at the ground. You're a better person than I am, Elihu."
"What do you mean? We're all pretty equal now. The Christ died for both of us, and we both needed a Savior. We were both sinners."
"Oh, it's not that. It's just I don't want to be part of this group anymore. I just want to go home. I know that there are things I could learn from Saul, and I know he's a great preacher. My uncle says he's the greatest preacher in the Christian movement right now, but we just don't get along. I think he really doesn't like me, so I just want to go home."
"At least you can go home," Elihu said with a smile. "My life would have been in danger if I had remained in Jerusalem. I had to come, and I don't think I can go home for a long time."
Both looked at each other for a long moment. Then they both turned their attention back to the preaching, and nothing more was said. This broadcast has come from the book Champions of the King by Sally Pierson Dillon, with permission from the Review and Herald Publishing Association. This book and the rest of the series, War of the Ages, can be purchased by going to www.adventistbookcenter.com or by calling 1-800-765-6955. I'm your narrator, Austin Backus, and this audio project is a gift to you from my free Christian book ministry, RXF 1888. Please visit our website, www.rxf1888.com, to request free Christian books for both kids and adults. And join us here again for more stories from Mark the Recording Angel.